When I first read this case, what stayed with me wasn't the names, and it wasn't the details. It was a mother's voice, a voice that didn't come from anger, and not from hatred either. It came from exhaustion. The voice of a mother who has lived for years with a single question. A question that doesn't leave her at night and doesn't leave her in the morning. The question is simple, but no answer has ever been found. What really happened? Today we're going to take a closer look at one of the most famous, complex, and heartbreaking criminal cases in recent Iranian history. A case where no body was ever found, no truth ever fully convinced everyone, and no ending ever brought this pain to an end. It's the story of a 19-year-old female university student and a young man who had no criminal record before this incident, but who has spent years in prison under a death sentence. The story begins on the night of March 3, 2014. At around 10 p.m., the father of a 19-year-old girl named Ghazaleh went to police station 103 in the Gandhi district. He reported that his daughter had left home at 3 p.m. to visit a dermatologist's office on Zafar Street, but after that, her phone was turned off and there had been no sign of her. Police investigations showed that Ghazaleh had waited at the doctor's office for some time, but before seeing the doctor, she left the clinic to take care of something else. A key point her father mentioned was that after leaving the clinic, Ghazaleh called one of her friends and said she was heading to the home of a young man named Arman, someone her family knew well. Not long before Ghazaleh disappeared, her family had traveled to Turkey. During that trip, they met another family who had a young son named Arman. That acquaintance quickly turned into a romantic relationship between Ghazaleh and Arman. After returning to Iran, their relationship continued. Both families were aware of it, and the relationship was formed with the intention of marriage. However, according to Ghazaleh's mother, in a note of complaint Ghazaleh had left behind, the relationship had deteriorated in its final months. Nearly 3 months before her disappearance, Ghazaleh and Arman had ended their relationship. Based on Ghazaleh's last phone call and the destination she mentioned, police quickly summoned Arman to the Criminal Investigation Department. During questioning, Arman said their relationship had lasted about 2 years. Both families knew about it, but it had always been tense. Interrogations continued until one day, Arman made a confession that shocked everyone. Arman said that on March 3rd, Ghazaleh had called him and asked to meet and talk. He said his mother was at home and he couldn't let Ghazaleh in, but after his mother left the house to run an errand, he told Ghazaleh she could come over. Ghazaleh arrived and they began talking. Arman said he brought up his decision to continue his education abroad, which made Ghazaleh extremely upset. The argument escalated, shouting, yelling, pushing. According to Arman, during the struggle, Ghazaleh's head hit the edge of the bed and she fell unconscious onto the floor. But the story didn't end there. Arman confessed that in a moment of intense rage, he struck Ghazaleh's head several more times and then hit her repeatedly with a pull-up bar. Actions that suggested the incident had gone far beyond a simple argument. Arman said that after he was sure Ghazaleh had died, he wrapped her body in a large plastic bag, placed it inside a suitcase, and dumped the suitcase into a large trash container far from where he lived. Despite all these ambiguities, in January 2016, the court issued a death sentence against Arman. But the case did not end there. In September 2016, the head of the judiciary temporarily halted the execution. Arman's lawyers presented new documents, including the renewal of Ghazaleh's health insurance and her university leave of absence. They argued that Ghazaleh might still be alive. The court later ruled that the insurance renewal had been automatic, and the academic leave had been requested by Ghazaleh's mother, who still hoped her daughter might be alive. Years passed. Arman's parents repeatedly tried to obtain forgiveness, pleading, crying, sitting for hours outside the prison. Arman's mother said, "We clawed at the prison floor for 7 hours. We begged for mercy." On the other side, Ghazaleh's family said the only thing keeping them standing was seeking justice for their daughter. In January 2019, a reconciliation meeting was held. Ghazaleh's family said they would forgive Arman if he revealed the location of their daughter's body. Arman said nothing. In January 2020, a new execution date was set. Once again, time was granted. Once again, the sentence was suspended. Today, Arman remains in prison and has even continued his education there. Ghazaleh's family remains firm in demanding the death penalty. A case without a body, with confession and denial, filled with contradictions. The questions remain: why was the initial confession made? If the body was dumped in the trash, why was it never found? What really happened that day? Before passing judgment, perhaps the only thing we can do is try to understand the pain on both sides. I hope that one day the full truth of this case will come to light, and that justice, whatever form it takes, will be carried out. In the years following the initial verdict, Arman's case entered a phase where it was no longer just a legal file. It became a draining cycle of waiting, delays, hope, and fear. During the course of the proceedings in 2019 and 2020, Arman was sentenced to death by qisas at least twice. Each time the sentence was issued, but its execution was postponed. In one of those instances, the process went as far as the gallows. Arman was taken for execution, but at the very last moment, the execution was halted. Around the same time, Ghazaleh's family gave Arman 1 month. Their condition was simple: that he reveal the location where Ghazaleh's body had been abandoned. At the same time, Arman's lawyer pursued a different path. He announced that Ghazaleh's Facebook account had been reactivated and that her family had also obtained a university leave of absence on her behalf. Citing these points, the lawyer claimed his client's innocence and filed a request for a retrial. Throughout those years, every time an execution order was issued, Arman was transferred to solitary confinement. This happened repeatedly, sometimes for only a few days, sometimes for weeks, but each time it ended with the same crushing uncertainty. In 2021, Arman's lawyer and the head of the Dispute Resolution Center announced that the judicial review of the case had concluded and that the court's final decision was execution. At that point, carrying out the sentence depended entirely on the decision of Ghazaleh's family. But that year became the hardest of all for Arman. Within just 3 weeks, he was transferred to solitary confinement 4 times in preparation for execution. In October 2021, Arman's lawyer sent an official letter to the head of Iran's judiciary stating that Ghazaleh's body had never been found and that her academic leave and renewed health insurance remained unresolved issues. They claimed that written testimony from several witnesses existed, asserting that Ghazaleh had been seen in the city of Zahedan. A few days after the execution, Arman's father repeated these claims. He said that 5 witnesses had testified in court that they had seen Ghazaleh at different times and locations. According to him, the last witness claimed to have seen Ghazaleh in a wheelchair, accompanied by a Pakistani man, at the Iranian Red Crescent Hospital in Dubai, where the young woman had identified herself as Ghazaleh. However, none of these claims altered the course of the verdict. The execution was initially scheduled for October 13, 2021, but it was postponed to October 16th. On October 17th, Arman was once again transferred to solitary confinement. Everything was prepared for the execution, yet once again, it was canceled. Arman's lawyer later stated that at that time, the execution had been halted due to a general decision to suspend all executions. But this was not the end of the transfers. On November 1, 2021, Arman was moved to solitary confinement yet again, with the execution planned for November 3rd. Once again, the sentence was not carried out. And then, at dawn on November 24, 2021, there was no further delay. Arman was executed at Rajai Shar prison in Karaj. On that same day, November 24, 2021, the spokesperson for the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, described Armin's execution as shocking and alarming, stating that it had been carried out despite repeated appeals from various organizations and even direct contact from the United Nations with Iranian authorities urging them to halt the execution. There has also been a feature film made about the case of Arman and Ghazaleh, titled Bodiless. The film is inspired by the real events of the case and focuses on what Ghazaleh's family went through, showing the long and painful hardships they endured in their pursuit of justice and accountability. Although Bodiless is based on this real case, it does not follow the events exactly as they happened. Some of the details presented in the film differ from the documented reality of the Parvanda. Even so, it remains a well-made and deeply unsettling film, capturing the emotional weight of loss, uncertainty, and the exhausting path of seeking justice, even when the truth itself remains unresolved. Friends, these were all the details of this case. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Please write your opinions in the comments. Take care of yourselves. Until another criminal case, goodbye.